Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and do you want to upgrade the steering wheel on your BMW? I'll show you how. All right, so let's talk about this project a little bit before we do it and the reasons why you're going to want to do this yourself. Now, if you've noticed on some of the latest BMWs, especially the new M2, M3s, and M4s, the LCI models, the refresh models, they have a new steering wheel. It has some changes to it. It has some design changes. It has a flat bottom across the bottom edge. And I was talking to the awesome guys at Infinite Autowerks about their custom steering wheel. I like to think of this as OEM Plus. So this is going to take a number of the design elements that you see in the new OEM steering wheel and add custom features like colors, the stripes, and a lot of other options that you can do. Now, I've chose red because of my red M2. You can do blue, you can do all kinds of other colors. So make sure to check out their website and go through their custom configurator and the options of what you can add to your custom steering wheel. Now, changing this out isn't very hard. I wanted to walk you through this whole process and what it would be like to add a steering wheel like this. Now, keep in mind, you don't lose any functionalities here. I have a heated steering wheel. It's still going to have that. The button's going to be on the side. This has vibration and all the other options that you can have. You're not going to lose any of the OEM functions, and you're going to gain the OEM look plus more as you can customize. So I'm really excited to get this in my car. But we have to start in the trunk. Because we're going to be taking the steering wheel airbag off, we have to unplug our battery or pull off the negative post off our battery. So let's get started in the trunk. All right, so here I am in the trunk here of my M2. I've taken this back board out. There's no handle. You just slide a tool down or something similar on the side and pull it up to get the board up and out. And then go ahead and pull the negative post on your battery. What you want to do is just loosen this 10mm, which mine is already loosened. And then you can just take the post off and tuck it down in a spot where it's not going to come back up and touch. Again, this is not a hard project. We just want to make sure that we don't have any airbag errors as we do this work. The other thing is don't close your trunk. Make sure not to close your trunk. Leave it open while you do this work. Let's go ahead and jump up in front and we're going to walk through what it takes to get your steering wheel off. All right, so the very first thing we have to do is take our airbag off. Now our airbag has two big hooks on the back side that is holding this into place. To get to those hooks, we have to come in through the side of the steering wheel. Now, previous generations of BMWs had holes, much kind of like this one, on the side where you could insert a tool to press on that hook to release your airbag. In this case, it's sealed. Now, as you can see, there's a tiny little notch right there. That is what BMW describes as a 4mm slit, but it's all sealed up. So what you're going to want to do is take a tool very carefully and open that slit. Don't make it any bigger than it needs to be on either side. And you're never going to see it as long as you're very, very careful. But you are going to have to open up that slit. Now, once you get that done on both sides, here on the outside, just so you can see it more easily, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to insert a tool into that opening. Now, I have a T30, a flat-headed T30 right here. They also recommend using a T15 because it's a little bit narrower, but it has this nice flat top on it that we're going to be pressing inward to press on that hook. I'll show you more of what that looks like once I get these opened up and get it partially loose. But be very, very careful as you do this to open this, and then we'll get a tool to the inside and unhook the airbag. All right, so you can see the airbag is partially off. You can see a little bit of a crack on this side. What I'll normally do is when I insert the tool, you are not prying forward and back or any way. It's a straight in push. And you can see the angle that it comes straight in. So it comes straight in until you kind of can feel an obstacle. And what I usually will do is I'll wiggle the airbag a little bit and you can feel it conducted through the end of your tool when you're right on the spring clip that's holding this. So once you kind of feel them all line up, I can kind of press a little bit forward and back, and you'll feel that spring clip, and then you very firmly press inward, and then you'll feel one side pop free. So as you can tell, I've got one side off. What I'll normally do is I'll put a plastic trim tool or something, I'll lay it in here so it doesn't fall back on the other side. Sometimes if you jam it out too far, it makes the other side harder to get off. But just try one side, then work the other side, and then it'll come right out. Once we have it out, I'll show you how to unplug it off the back, so don't just yard it away really, really hard. But this isn't a hard thing to do. You just have to be careful as you take this off. Okay, so get one side and then work the other side, and then we'll unplug the airbag. All right, so once you have the clip off on the other side, you can see that your airbag is out. There's a little depression clip here on top that you're going to press on, and then you're going to unhook the airbag. and then we're going to walk our way getting the rest of these accessories off. I will speak to paddles if you have an automatic car. I do not. I have a manual, so I have one less step than the automatics, but I can at least speak to it because we'd have to take the paddle shifters off before the steering wheel comes off. But go ahead and get your airbag off and safely set it aside. Okay, so the airbag's off. Let's talk about the rest. So go ahead and unplug here and here. Now, if you have the automatic with the paddle shifters here on the back, you're going to have right here, you're going to have a screw, which I believe is a T20. You're going to need to undo that and pull out the paddle shifters and actually unplug them as well and feed them out the back. Obviously, I don't have that with a 6-speed manual, but you're going to need to take your paddle shifters off. Now, here in the center, this is a T60 Torx bolt. It is really on here, really strong, so you might need help. You might be able to get it undone with one hand with a driver, or on the other end, hold the steering wheel. You might need an extra set of hands to help you hold the steering wheel to break this loose. And then you can just work the steering wheel off. And then we're going to be looking to transferring all of these components to the new steering wheel. All right, so with the bolt out, you can just very carefully lift your steering wheel up and away off the steering column. That bolt is very stiff. I ended up using a breaker bar to get it to start to turn. So you may be prepared for that, or a long-handled socket wrench, which could work as well. But I ended up using my breaker bar to break that bolt free. Now, we'll talk about it when we reinstall. BMW does recommend replacing that bolt. I've seen people replace it. I've seen people not replace it. In most occasions, when I've done projects like this, I have not replaced that bolt. But that'll be up to you, and the part numbers will be listed in the video description below. All right, so go ahead and take your steering wheel off. Let's take it to someplace safe, and let's start transferring components. All right, again, so if you have the automatic, you will have taken your paddle shifters out. You'll have a gap right here. Go ahead and flip your steering wheel over and undo these T20s, because we need to transfer all of the switches, the vibration motor, and everything else into the new steering wheel. Okay, so once you have those out, go ahead and flip it back over. And we're going to be working to get this trim off. Now, if you look, you've got a whole number of T20s in here. You also have here and here. You also have the three big ones holding down this locking plate as well. So you're going to slowly start undoing all these pieces so we can work this trim off. And then we're going to be transferring our M1, M2 buttons, and we're going to be transferring the rest of our buttons to the new steering wheel. Okay, but go ahead and take those T20s out, take those out as well, and take the centers out to take this locking plate out, or at least in this case, loosen it up. All right, so a couple of things. So these three big silver ones are actually T25s. They're very soft metal, so be very gentle when you take them out. I had one of them where I could tell when I set into it with my socket that it wanted to mush a little bit. So I just made sure it was really straight, and I very firmly and carefully took one out, because what you don't want to do is strip one of those bolts. You also have another plug that comes up right here that comes up to your switches, so you're going to want to unplug that before you pull the trim off. And then if you have the heated steering wheel, of course, which almost all of us do, we'll also have another plug here in the center. So you want to unplug here, and then slowly work the trim off. There's a post right here in the center. This is just a little locking post that goes in right here. So very gently work it up and away until you have the trim off. Okay, so then we're going to be transferring these components to the new trim. So go ahead and take your steering wheel, set it aside for now, and we're going to transfer the components to the new trim. All right, so you're actually looking at a T9 Torx screw, little teeny tiny ones on each corner. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can also, if you wonder which ones to pull, you can always compare against the new trim. Look at it, 1, 2, 3. You can see where they come off. Then your buttons are off, and it's just a matter of just working the wiring harness out of the existing clips as you work it free of the existing trim. Some of these clips are pretty stiff, but just work its way around and around and around, and then we will transfer over to the new one, okay? And we'll get the wiring harness in the right place, but that should be everything we need from the existing trim. Make sure that you don't lose any of those screws. We're going to transfer it to hold the new buttons in place. Go ahead and set this aside, secure your buttons into the new trim. All right, so as we look to transfer the rest of the wiring harness, go ahead and unplug your M1 and M2 buttons. That's a blue plug right here with T20s here and here. That allows you to take that wiring harness off, and you can take this top cover off. Now you can see the rest of this wiring harness that needs to run up and over to this side. Okay, so you're going to just take this very gently out, as we slowly work the rest of this wiring harness off. And as you can see, it's pretty much just connected in almost everywhere as we go through. And we're going to be preserving pretty much the same shape, but we just have to be really careful as we pull this all out of all of these connections so we can lay it back into the new steering wheel in the same setup. Now you might want to take this opportunity to go and unscrew your motor here. Those are T20s here and here. And then we're going to be looking at the rest of this wiring harness that comes down as we unplug it all. Okay, so go ahead and slowly work all this free and get this wiring harness out and free from the original steering wheel with all of the plugs that all set down into place. So let's walk back through this in a partial state. So I got the wiring harness out of the existing one, including this little aluminum plate that sits on this post right here. What I found worked really well is I've used a trim tool, or a pick tool, excuse me, to get underneath and just very gently lift this up. Because what you don't want to do, one, is break this because it's a ground. And two, you don't want to break the little fingers off because that's what's providing friction down on this post, right? So as you can see, it's pretty loose right now because I pried it back upwards. So I'm going to very gently, very, very gently just press some of those fingers back down into a flat position. So when it goes back on, it'll hang on to that post really firmly. So route the wiring harness up and over. There's a groove right here. You pull this trim piece up and away and it fits underneath this flange, back through this channel right here, underneath the flange here, and back through the channel right here. As you can see, it start to fit its way down. Now on this side, we have this plug where this red and white wire comes underneath and snaps into this plug right here, which has the plug from the controller. So I snapped that plug back in the same place where it came off the OEM, so it's reasonably in the same spot. Now, the one thing that is going to be different is you can see your heated connection here is coming from up here instead of down here like it does on the OEM, but we'll deal with that one in a second. So we just slowly start laying all the pieces back into place so they all make sense. Okay, so start on this side, get that secure, work your way around, and then we're going to get this controller down into place. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is take this metal frame off of the motor because we're going to relocate it further down in the steering wheel. So as you move this around, you can see that there are two little teeny tiny Phillips screws right there and right there. You can reach them by coming through the hole in the frame itself. So pull one off, move the other side, pull it off really carefully. And these are teeny tiny screws, so try not to lose them as they come off, just like that. Then we're going to be looking at our new motor that you can see here, and you can see there's matching screw holes here and here for the motor, and the motor is just going to fit really nicely into this new frame. So we're going to set it down into this new frame and then put the screws in to hold it in place, and we're going to use this to relocate to the new location in the lower part of the steering wheel. So go ahead and get this done. As you transfer the motor into this new frame, if you notice that these teeny tiny little screws have conical washers, for lack of a better description, on them. And you're going to want to pull those off because these little washers will get in the way, or whatever these are, these little buffers, will get in the way when you put the screw into place, and that will cause this rotation head not to spin. It would actually hit the motor. So what we want to do is make sure that that's snugged down nice and tight so it'll rotate through cleanly. Okay, so go ahead and get both screws in after you pull off those little like flexi washers, and go ahead and get that secure, and then we'll get this down into place. Okay, so you can see how you slot the vibration motor down into this cutout here, and it only goes in one way simply because of how it's slotted and grooved and fits in. You'll want to put the new extension wire on first. I find it easier to fit all in with that in place. Now, the two screws, you can use the original black ones. Now, it looks like it's kind of flush mount. I'll use this as an example right here. This looks like it's solid material, but it's actually not. That hole is filled full of this kind of marshmallowy sort of material. So when you drive that screw in, it grabs onto the screw. So it may look like it's flush mounted plastic or something similar, but it's not. So go ahead and secure both of those T20s, those black T20s that you used originally on the motor, drive them into the place here and here. And then you can put the new cover on and snap that down into place. Now and again, there's really only one way for it to go, the way it's slotted against the spokes of the wheel. Now, before you do this, make sure to check you've got a good connection here. This is plugged in really, really nicely with this extension that we're going to route up and under the trim here, up the vane, once we get that into place. Okay, but go ahead and get your motor done, get the cover on, and then we're going to flip it back over and we're putting everything back together. So once you have that back cover on over the motor, make sure you've got enough space of the wires that they fit up here. Be very gentle on these wires, because the last thing you want to do is pull out any of the pins or have it get trapped in your trim when you put it back on. So just make sure it lays down really, really nicely. Next up are your M1 and M2 buttons here, top and bottom. Keep in mind you've got the same spongy material here in those sockets, essentially where the screws go. So you got to push them in fairly firmly, but just into snug. And as you can tell, they're in very solidly. So 1 and 2, you can see where the wiring harness from that goes nicely under these clips here as well, so to get it all laid out. And we're getting pretty close to putting the trim back on. So when you look at this, the one thing that's really going to kind of be in the way is this new heated steering wheel run, which is right over here, where before, remember, it ran down here below, now it's running here. So just make sure it doesn't sit on top, that'll get in the way. You're gonna wanna tuck it down here to the inside once we get everything all back in, right? But we still have to plug all the rest back in. Go ahead and plug in your M2 button over here. Your M1 plugs in to the rest over here. You can take this line and run it down under the plastic trim like you did when you took it off. So you're going to take this and run it underneath this plastic trim right here. So it sits very nicely and is covered. So that'll be set. And then once that's all good to go, we can put our silver plate back on. But go ahead and get caught up to here. Then we're going to put silver plate back on and the trim back on. All right, so we've got this center section on. Make sure that you get the wire connection here. Don't forget to put that back on. And I found it easier with these 3 spring feet to actually kind of press the plate down and then just screw those screws down. And they'll hit a point where they stop. And you want to have them all the way down to the stop. And then you can just press on it and you can tell that it sounds right. It sounds like it did when we first started. Okay, so that's good. We've got our M1 and M2 buttons in. Everything else is plugged in. We've got our vibration plugged in here. Our heating is plugged in here, and we're going to run the wire to this side when we put the trim on. You don't want it over the top. And we've got it routed down through here. So really, we are at the point where we can put the trim back on, and it's just going to be a matter of just flipping it over and getting it all to fit back down into place. So keep in mind that you've got to plug the heat in. The heat button is now here on the side. Don't forget your connection here. That's going to plug back into your controllers here and goes back down in this little clip. And then just fit the trim all back down into place really neatly. And at that point, your new steering wheel's back together. We can go back in the car and reinstall it. But go ahead and get your trim on, and then we'll get the wheel back into the car. Okay, so my trim is down and in place. Make sure that you don't have any cables that are getting impinged or pinched on. Get in the way of the trim. It all settles down really, really nicely. Flip it over, go ahead and reuse those 2 T20s from the back to secure the buttons, then secure your trim into place, and that'll be set. Now in my case, again, because I don't have paddles, I'm gonna put covers in. These covers just fit in, and the screws actually come through in the same position that you would have if you had the paddles. So I'll just use the supplied screws and drive those in and put those covers on. At that point, we can take it back to the car and let's walk through getting it reinstalled. All right, y'all, so as you can see, the steering wheel's back in place, just sitting here for the moment. And keep in mind that the splines are keyed, so there's really only one way the steering wheel can go on, which is nice. So you don't have to worry about it being perfectly straight, because it will be just when you put it back into place. But what I really wanted to point out was the alignment of all of our plugs and cables right here. So this is really important because your airbag's going to go back into this space, and there's only so much clearance for the airbag to sit. So you have to make sure that all of your plugs here are tucked down really, really nicely. Now, initially, I had the cable for the heated steering wheel coming around the front, and that just doesn't work because it would impinge, and then the plug, which is that white plug right there, would also get in the way. There's 2 little hooks right here that you can take. The 2 plugs here, the kind of purpley one and the black one, are stacked right here. And then there's a little bit of void space on this side of the control box. So what I ended up doing was routing the cable down through the grooves. Underneath the trim, there's grooves right there, routed the cable behind the control box, which you can see just a little bit right there, and then looped it around the front. Then I can plug it, I can plug it all together and set that white plug back and down into that void space right there. And I really think that that's the only real technical challenge of this install, is getting that all to fit in really, really nicely. Okay, so make sure that your trim is on straight, you've got all your screws in, and in my case, I don't have paddle shifters, so I've got the covers on that I've mentioned before. Make sure to reinstall your paddle shifters if you have those. Obviously, I can't show that, but in this case, as you can see, everything is set in really, really nicely. Now, all we need to do is just plug in here and plug in here as well, and then we're going to put that main bolt back in. Now, the part number for the bolt will be in the video description if you want to replace it. It's 63 Newton meters on a torque wrench when you put it back in, so make sure to get that set in straight. And then we'll do one last look before we put the airbag on. All right, so one last look, make sure that everything is plugged in, all of your wiring harness is routed really nicely, make sure that your M1, M2 buttons work and are plugged in here and here. Make sure that your connection here to your, essentially what is your horn plate, right? When you press on it, this is what clicks. Make sure that that's in. You've got your heated steering wheel if you have it here. You've got all of the rest of your wiring tucked down really, really nicely. And you've got the control box tucked back, and it should fit all in. This will leave nice space here for your airbag. So go ahead and just take your airbag, take your cable, plug it back in, and then just rock your airbag back into place. It should snap in. Once it's set into place, press on it, make sure that it feels right and it moves around and it feels like when you would press the horn normally. All right, we'll take a look at that when it's done, but we're almost done. All right, y'all, so all done. Looks really, really good. Go ahead and test it, make sure that it works. Obviously, I don't have my battery reconnected yet. That's gonna be the last thing we're going to do. But this looks really, really good. Just got to clean off my fingerprints all over the place. So I am really psyched to have this in the car. Looks so, so good. So the last thing you're going to want to do is go back to your battery, go ahead and reconnect your ground post and put your floorboard back in, and you're good to go. Obviously, you'll want to test everything. You want to test all of your buttons, but they should work because everything's all plugged in. Well done. Good job. All right, y'all, all done, so make sure to test all your buttons and functionality, make sure that everything works properly, but I expect it will as long as you walk through that whole wiring harness and everything is plugged in. This is a relatively straightforward project. It just takes a little bit of time and detail to get everything to fit in, and especially proper plug placement kind of at that 6 o'clock position to make sure your airbag fits back in nicely. Now, I am really grateful to Infinite Autowerks for making a fantastic product. I am so excited to have this in my car, and remember, you can customize all kinds of different designs for what you want with your wheel, different colors, different layouts, everything. So make sure to check out their website. The link for the product will be in the video description below, so you can go straight to it along as well with all the tools and everything else you need to get this done. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It would make a huge difference to my channel, and I would truly appreciate it if you do so. I'll see you on my next project.